What's up everybody, Extramillion here once again with Totally Sick Bioshock Infinite Edition. So I finally decided to stop being so lazy and get my Bioshock Infinite run started. So yes, Bioshock Infinite finally came out after being in development since 2007 after the original Bioshock, and it was first announced I believe in August of 2010, then the first footage was shown at E3 the next year. So this is going to be a pretty good contender for Game of the Year. It's probably one of my favorite games in most recent memory. This first video will go over the Lighthouse, the Welcome Center, the Raffle Square, the Comstock Center Rooftops, and the Monument Island Gateway, so the first couple of areas.
Rowing!
Rowing? Hadn't planned on it.
So you expect me to shoulder the burden?
No. But I do
You
expect
are
to do
Booker
all the
DeWitt,
rowing.
who is a former Pinkerton,
Your idea.
My idea.
I made it very clear that I don't
and
believe
you
in
have
the
been tasked
exercise.
to basically go to the floating city of
Imagine that's
Columbia
wonderful exercise.
and retrieve a girl to pay off your gambling debts.
Excuse me. How much
Now, that's obviously not the entire story, but unlike most of my other playthroughs, I'll try not to spoil the story before I get to it this time, since this game has a pretty phenomenal twist. The last 20 minutes are pretty amazing.
Him. I imagine he has a greater interest in getting there than I do.
I suppose he does, but there's no point in asking.
Why not?
Because he doesn't row.
He doesn't row.
No, he doesn't row.
Ah, I see what you mean. We've arrived.
Now, obviously, being a Bioshock game, there are a few things that are similar. There's... in this game, there are Vigors, which replace plasmids. There's Gear, which replaces tonics. Gear were originally called Nostrums, but that was changed.
Excuse me. It's Booker
Everything
DeWitt.
works pretty much the same. One of the big differences you'll find is that there is no radio. All the characters
Is anyone here?
that you can interact with will basically talk to you face to face or over some sort of loudspeaker. There's not like a radio like Atlas could contact you. Which unfortunately also means that there is no way to skip a lot of the dialogue.
Wait a minute, that card.
Vigors, like plasmids, work off of a substance. In Bioshock it was Eve, in this one they're called salts. They were originally supposed to have a limited use, and then you would have to find them again, sort of like if your weapon ran out of ammo, you would just discard it and then you'd have to pick up a different one. Now it's sort of a compromise between the two. They still use a bar, but the bar is now segmented, and different Vigors have larger or smaller segments, so you get more uses out of them. Like the first one that you can get, called Possession, you start with only 2 uses, and after that you need more salts. So essentially the game shows really no difference between having a full segment, or a 99% full segment, and a 0% full segment. You have to have one segment completely full in order to be able to use it, whereas in the first Bioshock, even if you had the tiniest sliver, you could still use any ability that used even a ton of Eve, like Hypnotize Big Daddy.
No, God damn it!
The rules for this run are pretty much going to be the same as my other Bioshock ones. It's going to be the first weapon you get, which is the melee weapon. In this one, it's the Skyhook, which is sort of this like little hand-mounted power saw that you can get that allows you to travel the sky rails. The rails were originally supposed to be used for freight, but the Vox Populi, which are one of the warring factions, were using them to get around, so the police actually use them too. No Vigors is going to be one, except for one that you have to use, just like in Bioshock. This is also being played with no deaths on 1999 mode, which is the harder than hard mode. I like how this blimp appears just like the whale appeared in the original Bioshock, among other allusions to the original Bioshock. 1999 mode is a mode where not only is it a lot harder because you take more damage, enemies have more health, all that same stuff that you would expect to find on a hard mode, but every time you die it costs you $100. And if you don't have enough money, then you just get kicked back to the main menu. Also, enemies' health gets refilled. There's also no navigation, although I have all of that pretty much turned off anyway. Uh, 1999 mode is supposed to be a reference to not only were games back then in the late 90s, early 2000s a little bit more difficult than they are now, but they were a little less player-friendly. But 1999 is also the year that System Shock 2 came out, which is also a very difficult game. So the basic gist, or the setup for the story, if you haven't actually been following it, is you travel to this city, and when you get there, it is being currently warred over by one group called the Founders, which are these ultra-nationalistic, religious xenophobes, and the Vox Populi, which are kind of like if a labor union got a bunch of people together with guns and tried to, basically form an anarchic resistance group. The story behind Columbia itself as a city is that it was created as sort of a floating World's Fair, but then during the Boxer Rebellion, which is where basically there was a Chinese civil war, and these guys called the Boxers started to basically take over China, only to be stopped by 8 nations, one of which was the U.S. The Boxers attacked some members of the U.S., where Colombia revealed itself to be armed, heavily armed, so they fired on the Boxers, and so now everyone thinks of them as sort of less of a World's Fair and more like the Death Star.
Is it someone new? Someone from the sodden below? Newly come to Columbia.
So you basically have to go in as Booker and find this girl.
I just need passage into the city.
Passage to the city.
But of course, like most stories, nothing is quite as it seems.
The way to Columbia is through rebirth in the sweet waters of baptism. Will you be cleansed, brother?
Hey.
I baptize you in the name of our prophet, in the name of our founders, and the name of our Lord.
I should probably also mention that since this game has not quite been out for that long, I won't be able to do the normal thing that I try to do with games, where I say, very specific statistics and numbers. Like for the Skyhook, I don't know exactly how much damage it does, or like how much health enemies have, so instead of rattling off those stats, I'll probably just chime in with something historically significant, like I did with the Boxers just a moment ago, or something like the Silver Eagles that they use as currency. Those were not actually minted by the US until the 80s. And they wouldn't be able to have been minted in 1912 anyway, since there was a silver shortage during that time.
That idiot priest needs to learn the difference.
And also, since these people are, it's supposed to be like a floating World's Fair, like I already mentioned. They idolize the Founding Fathers, despite the fact that the Founding Fathers, if you know anything about history, they, especially George Washington, would have despised the notion that one person should rule over a nation forever, like Comstock does, the main villain of the game. He did not like the idea of a King Washington, essentially. Plus, most of the Founding Fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, really pushed for the separation of church and state.
Between 9 a.m. on it.
Featuring in-depth coverage of today's festivities. There will be hot dogs for the
So, as you can tell, these people, they kind of either idealize or completely omit a lot of America's more seedy past.
The angel Columbia did present herself to Father Comstock and show him a vision of the future.
Coming up soon is one of the game's first major skips. I skip picking up the first Vigor. In fact, I think you can skip pretty much every Vigor in the game except for Shock Jockey, which is required to advance the story. Funny enough, you can actually buy it later at a Veni Vidi Vigor vending machine, which means that the developers knew that people would be able to sequence break and put it in anyway. The sequence break basically skips the entire raffle part.
He's strong in the sword, but a bit weak.
And it skips the fight with the first unique enemy, the Fireman, who's one of the heavy hitters.
I am that kind of talk, friend. That kind of talk, Ross.
Yeah, that's where they said I'd find her.
Telegram, Mr. DeWitt.
Huh.
Telegram for you, sir.
DeWitt, stop. Do not.
Also, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, although you could have seen the little pop-ups. I have some of the pre-order DLC, which will come in very handy. I have all the stuff from the Industrial Revolution and
I agree.
the gears that come along with it.
If I told you a man could hoist a
Young sir,
So what you're supposed to do is take the sample of possession and then use it on the machine at the gate to get through, but if you just jump on this sign, you can jump over and then fall out of bounds, and then the game will just load the next area.
Metal. With possession, you are the master.
So this is where I'll pick up a lot of my equipment. One of the pre-order bonuses was to have a bunch of money and infusions at the beginning. With the infusions, you can increase either your health, your shields, or your salts.
Why are you following me?
We were already
Pretty much the same thing that you could do in the original Bioshock. For these beginning ones, I use them to increase all of my shields. Your shields are essentially like another health bar, since they do not absorb any more damage than is required of them, which means that if you have a tiny bit of shields left and you take a ton of damage, like one big hit, it'll break your shield, and
If it doesn't kill you.
the excess damage will take off some of your health. So it's essentially just like having 2 health bars.
Whoa! Damn hook must be magnetized.
I don't know the exact amount of damage that Skyline Strike does, but I do know that it can kill normal enemies in pretty much one hit. There are other enemies in the game that are sort of like normal bad guys called beasts that carry rocket launchers and armor. If you Skyline Strike them, it will knock their helmet off, but it will not kill them in one hit. So I'm not sure if it does a finite amount of damage or if it just would require 2 of them. I'll have to test further. I do know that the Skyhook does a range of damage. The weapons in this game, you can turn on the sort of like Borderlands-looking numbers that pop up and show you like enemy health and how much damage you're doing. And I know the Skyline does around like 112 damage to 280 damage normally, which you can increase with different gears that you're wearing. The gears that I am wearing are Electric Punch, which gives you a 70% chance to basically have Shock Jockey on your wrench, which not only adds damage, but it stuns enemies for up to 4 seconds, which is incredibly useful. As you can see, it vaporizes people and makes their head explode. I also have Sugar Rush, which means that after you pick up any consumable item, like a soda or a coffee or a candy bar or whatever, your movement speed is increased by 50% for 3 seconds, which is really useful in this beginning area when you're trying to run around. I'll also pick up 2 others that I'll talk about once I get them. These hooded guys who look like the Clan are the Fraternal Order of the Raven. And they pretty much are the Clan, since not only do they wear hoods, and they're extremely religious, and they worship John Wilkes Booth. Pretty much what I'm doing in this little area. This is probably the hardest part, since I have to run through all of these guys several times. I'm basically hoping that I'll get something like that, like coffee right there, so that it will increase my speed thanks to Sugar Rush. Basically, when I went over into the Order of the Raven, I got a key that opens a chest all the way back here, and it just contains another infusion, so I just backtrack to go pick it up. It's kind of weird that those guys are called the Fraternal Order of the Raven when the thing that you get from them is Murder of Crows, the Vigor. And Elizabeth, the character that you meet later, that you have to escort, actually calls them crows. But I guess Fraternal Order of the Crow doesn't really sound that cool. It's kind of interesting if you notice during the fight with like these police officers, you'll notice that despite the fact that this is like 1912 and everything seems very like backwards and racist, that there are female and male police officers, despite the fact that back then women, they wouldn't have even had the right to vote. There is a reason for this anachronistic gender equality, but I won't quite go into it just yet because it's kind of a spoiler. So now we'll go up to the second floor and we'll fight the very first unique enemy, which is a crow. Or technically I guess they're called zealots. This is also where I'll find the first real gear that you're supposed to find if you don't have any of the DLC. Now, the gear in this game is not fixed like the tonics were in the Bioshock games. It's random, but it's sort of like a weird random, where this gear, they're always in the same spot, but the game will choose between 4 or 5 different random gears, but never more than that. So you can't really get any gear you want from any one random spot. Like, that gear in particular was always the same 4 or 5 ones, but it was random between those 4 or 5 every time. So I just basically reloaded the checkpoint until I got the one that I wanted.
I shall not fail again!
This enemy, he uses pretty much all melee attacks, so I can just kind of stomp him. The only other thing he does is teleport. So he's basically like a melee Houdini splicer. And of course, the electric punch keeps him frozen in place so that I can just wail on him.
What's this? Some new kind of vigor?
I'm trying not to pick up his Vigor bottle so that it doesn't make me do the incredibly long drinking animation.
Push him out!
I can get to Monument Island from that station.
That gear that I picked up while I was rambling on about the randomness of gears is called Urgent Care, and it's one of the more useful ones because it increases the rate at which your shield will recharge itself, and decreases the amount of time that you have to not be damaged before your shield will start to recharge itself. I believe it's normally 5 seconds, so it decreases it by 1 second down to 4.
Whoa!
So, which is incredibly useful. I'll just do a quick stop here and pick up another infusion and do a melee execution on this guy.
Just what the doctor ordered.
The last major gear that I'll need for a while, I'll get in this very next area called Vampire's Embrace, and it basically makes it so that when you kill someone with a melee attack, you get health back. There are several gear that give you health back for melee-related stuff, but this is pretty much the best one because it gives you health back no matter what, whereas some of the other ones are like 65% chance to get health back if you do a melee execution, whereas this one is basically just kill someone with a melee attack, you get health back. It's as simple as that. So, with the exception of Sugar Rush, I have pretty much all of the gear that I'm going to be using throughout most of the game. One good thing about gear that they have over tonics is that your vigor and your gear loadout can be changed on the fly from the menu. You don't need to go into like a gene tonic bank like you did in Bioshock 1 and 2. So if all of a sudden you're up against an enemy where, you know, X gear would be more useful than the gear you have now, you can just pause, equip it, and then you're good to go.
I know why you've come, false shepherd. I see every sin that blackens your soul. Wounded Knee, the Pinkertons, the drinking, the gambling, and of course, Anna. And now, to repay a debt, you've come for my land. But not all debts can be repaid, Booker.
You don't know me, pal.
Prophecy is my business, Mr. DeWitt. As blood is yours. Do you know why these men...
Oh, and just in case you hadn't noticed, that in the lower left-hand corner there, that is Devil's Kiss. It's a vigor that the game assumes you have by now, which is why it just gave it to me. Although I don't know why they don't do that for Possession, since you should also have that one by now if you didn't do the sequence breaking. But as you can see, it's segmented like I talked about earlier, and that fourth segment is not filled up all the way, so I wouldn't be able to use that one.
Thy path is twisted. Go back to the sorrow from which you came.
Holy shit. Gotta find the controls to take this thing to Monument Island. Okay, I'm sure I can get this thing going.
The Lord forgives everything. But I'm just a prophet. So I don't have to. Amen.
Amen.
Jesus! Hell out of here. Shit. That was close.
Alright, so we escape from the Zeppelin and somehow don't get our arm ripped out of its socket. And we're now at Monument Island, and that's the end of this video, so I will see you guys next time.